Okay. And yeah, thank you all for joining us this afternoon. I know we wanted to get together to provide an overview with some folks with Division of Drinking Water and Division of Water Quality to look at some of the statewide data tools that are available and specifically focus on the tools that we have to help identify domestic well communities that may have needs that aren't being met currently. So we did have a few speakers this afternoon. First will be Suzanne Klein. She's an Associate Government Program Analyst with the Division of Drinking Water, and she was planning to discuss the drinking water system outreach tool. And then Emily Houlihan, she's an engineering geologist in the Division of Water Quality, was going to go over the 2023 Combined Risk Assessment Dashboard. And then we'll have Kristen Abhold, who's a senior environmental scientist with the Division of Drinking Water. She's going to discuss the 2023 needs assessment. And Megan, did you want to add anything?
No, I mean, I think there's no super specific objective to come out of this meeting. It's more just wanted to make sure folks are aware of the various tools that keep getting expanded all the time very quickly. Because I think they can be useful for targeting outreach, for trying to figure out what potential solutions there might be for different communities. And so, we wanted to make sure that folks in TA that are working with these kind of communities are just aware of what's out there and the tools that can be applied. So with that, I'll turn it over to the speakers.
Great. I think, yeah, Suzanne, if you want to take it.
Great. Hi, everyone. So I'm going to go over the water system outreach tool, and it'll mostly be a quick demo of it, but I'll give you a little bit of background information first. And if you want to pull it up, there's a bit.ly here and the little scan code QR. I haven't tried this one in a while, so forgive me if it doesn't work, but the bit.ly still should. And when you open it, it comes to a landing splash screen that just says, use this tool properly. Just hit OK. So this tool was created for our SAFER staff to be able to quickly and easily do a spatial query if they were looking at a specific region or a specific large water system and determine what other public water systems and state smalls are surrounding or nearby or ripe for consolidation. So it started out as an internal tool, and then I think they wanted they meaning someone else above me wanted a public version of it for our partners and just for the public. But we have added different layers over time. So the main data layer is California drinking water systems location, and that incorporates the public water systems from the system area boundary layer, as well as the ones that aren't captured there. So there's, I think, maybe like 3,000 that don't have a public water system boundary, mostly non-communities. And then a good number, like 1,300 state small water systems. And so those are all incorporated here together. And you can kind of see it when you zoom in on different areas. The little tiny dots are either the state smalls or the non-communities. And there's a slight difference in the size. I'm not picking up on any right now, just glancing at it, but the non-communities tend to be a little bit bigger than the state smalls. And so these other layers here are stolen data from other places, a lot of them from Emily. And so just different optional layers that you can use to answer different questions that you might have. So the dry wells household was one that we added last year after the CalTAP conference. Someone had requested if we could show that, can trigger that one on and off, and it gets kind of busy. And so sometimes it's helpful to turn off some of the other layers, but you can kind of see from a distance where the concentrations of the dry wells are. And if you want more information on these layers individually, you can click on the little three dots and it will take you to a description. Some of the descriptions are more or less useful. Some of them will bring you to a page that looks like this, and that's because it's linked directly to the data source, so it will update on its own. And then other times it'll just be a static page. And so this one is for the main data main data layer, California drinking water system locations. And it says when it was last updated, and then just some metadata and details on the different layers and the meanings of the main data fields. So some of them more useful than others. And then, but if you Google those water sources, you'll be able to find the original data layer as well. So other than just being able to toggle different added data layers here and compare and look at different comparisons of CalEnviro screen, the DAC data, the main tools for doing the spatial analysis are up here in this bar, and then there's some filters over here. So if you wanted to do the consolidation analysis like this was intended for, you can access the instructions here, and they can be expanded a bit and like focus in on a specific region. I'm going to turn this back on. And so there are a couple of options. The first one is a little bit more simple. Option A, draw for water systems and then search around that. So I'm just going to choose one of these. Could say the Wiggly Star one is like total freehand. You can do whatever you'd like, and then it will close the loop. So if I wanted to look in kind of a general area where I see that there's a bunch of different water systems or a couple different water systems, for a good spot. Oops. Be over here. A lot of domestic wells right there. So I'll just go like this. Do a little squiggly, however you want to shape it. It automatically draws a 1 mile buffer, but you can change that. You can do fractions as well. It says clear this shape after applying the query. Right now that's checked. I'm going to uncheck it just in case I want to save it for later. And then you can rename it, and I'll say Southeast or Southwest Sanger. And then once you hit apply,
Right next to it. Right.
it opens up the results tab over here. And so this output gives you all of the water systems that are selected from that query. And you can scroll through them, but you can also export. Oh, where's my button going? There's usually an export button here. I'm not sure why it's not showing up. I think I'm not logged in. But there's usually a button here. I'll have to see if maybe it's broken that says export, and then you can export it to CSV, and it will just give you that information in an Excel form. And so that was basically for us to do outreach to our different water systems and state smalls. We would take that sheet and then contact them directly. Includes the output includes the admin address and email as well, so that we can just use that file to directly email them. And then just a note on some of the data in here. There is the risk status, but that is, it usually lags behind reality. So you definitely want to use the SAFER dashboard that has the live risk assessment status on there. But this is kind of a good tool if you're just doing general outreach in an area, or if you really want to compare different data layers and see how different systems and state smalls and domestic wells might be impacted by a specific project in an area. And then I'll do the other tool really quickly. So option two is to select an existing water city and then search for water systems based on that. Let's do Fresno. It's big, but I think it should work. So it's kind of a two-part tool. You have to first create a new layer based on that water system. So I'm going to use this middle button up here and select Fresno, and then go to the layer that it's inside of, California drinking water system location, and create a layer. Just call this Fresno. And then come back to the original tool and reset the options over here. So return features that have, there's two options in here. The default one is only return features that intersect with the shape drawn on the map, which I already did. And then this one is if it has a spatial relationship with features in another layer. So I've created a new layer for Fresno, and now I can choose that in the drop down It'll let me. There we go. Took a moment. And then again, you can optionally apply a filter. Just if you're running several different queries, it helps to rename it so they don't get them confused, because they will be selectable in the layer feature over here after you run it. So now I've got a lot more systems in this list, and it's working out. Nope, it's still not working. I'll have to check and see why the export isn't working, but typically people just export to CSV and then use it from there. So those are the two spatial query filters. You can also add additional layers. So if there's other data that you have, I think I'm running short on time, so I'm going to talk a little bit faster. But if you have an organizational account for Esri, then you can search within your own organization. You can grab one of these kind of links from the ArcGIS Esri REST services directory, or some people will have them linked on California Open Data. You can put that in here, and then the layer will be available in the regular layer list, or you can upload a file from your computer if you do want to play around and add some additional information to consider. And then you can also change the base map. So that's about it. I don't know if we have time for questions, so I can answer them later if not.
Yeah, thank you, Suzanne. I don't know if there's any questions. We can probably take one or two. And just to let folks know too, if you have questions, there's an option to raise your hand, or I think you can just come off mute whenever. Not seeing any. You're very thorough. Thank you, Suzanne. Well, if there are questions at the end, we can always come back. Otherwise, I think, Emily, if you wanted to move on to topic 2.
Yeah, let me share my screen. Okay, hopefully you all can see this. So I'm going to show you how to use the sort of the dashboard for the combined risk assessment for state small water systems and domestic wells. So this is a web tool that shows, to the best of our knowledge, the location of domestic wells and state small water systems in California, and displays their sort of relative risk in 3 different categories. So there's the combined risk, and that's made up of risk of water quality issues, risk of water shortage issues, and then socioeconomic risk. And so the combined tab shows the risk for all 3 of those categories. And then we also have separate maps that show the specific risk for the individual categories. So the layout of this dashboard, this central map console here shows it has 4 map tabs. The combined risk, again, like I explained, has all 3 together. And then the individual risk tabs show separated water quality risk, water shortage risk, and socioeconomic risk. And there's some links to the source data of these individual risk categories. So for example, the water quality risk, sorry, my cat wants to join. The water quality risk is from the Aquifer Risk Map. The water shortage risk is from the Department of Water Resources. And the socioeconomic risk is an analysis from OEHA and the State Water Board. So there's a couple, so first I'll explain the legend of the map. So the circles show the approximate location of domestic wells, and the size of the circles show how many domestic wells or domestic well records there are per square mile. The way we identify domestic wells currently is we use domestic well completion reports that are submitted to Department of Water Resources. So this is when a well is drilled, a report is sent to DWR. The sort of most detailed scale that these reports are available is count per square mile. So that's why we have it as a density. In most cases, we don't have specific lat longs for the domestic wells. So basically, a larger circle means more domestic wells per square mile, and a smaller circle means less domestic wells per square mile. The color scheme changes depending on what map you're looking at, but basically it usually shows the risk of whatever category type you're looking at. So here the color scheme is showing the combined risk, with darker red indicating a higher risk and a lighter yellow color indicating lower risk. So that's the map console. On the right-hand side of the dashboard are what are called like indicator numbers. So this is showing basically summary statistics about the data inside the dashboard. And these summary statistics change depending on what filters you've applied. So that's good to keep in mind. So right now I don't have any filters applied. So it's just showing the statewide totals of the numbers of at-risk domestic wells and state small water systems, as well as the total number of domestic wells and state small water systems. So the different filters that you can apply are distance to community water system. You can filter by county, you can filter by risk bin, and then you can filter by GSA or groundwater sustainability agency boundary. So I'll show an example. So if you basically drop down these filter menus, and then you can select one or multiple filterable options in every category. So here I just selected Fresno County. And what will happen is the map view will restrict to just showing locations that fit your filtering criteria. So here that's just locations inside Fresno County. And then the indicators on the right will also automatically update to show the new at-risk and total counts for just Fresno County. And then if you want to filter by distance to the nearest community water system, you just toggle on and off by clicking these buttons here. It does take a second to update, so if nothing changes, give it a minute. So here we're just showing domestic well and state small water system locations that are within the boundary of an existing community water system. And one thing that can be helpful if you're using this filter especially is you can turn on additional GIS layers to view inside the map tab. So you access that by clicking on this layer button here in the top right. And in this case, we want to see the boundaries of public water systems. And so I'll click this eye icon, and it will now show me the boundaries of public water systems in purple on the map here. And the way this filter is set up is, again, because we had the domestic well locations as a count per square mile section, if the community water system boundary intersected, I think it was the centroid of that section, we said that those domestic wells are within the boundary. And again, there's a little bit of uncertainty around the precise locations of domestic wells. So not all of these domestic wells may be exactly within that boundary, but the section is within that boundary. And you can add, as I said, multiple filters here. So this is adding in domestic wells and state smalls that are within 1 mile and within the boundary of a community water system. And yeah, so I think the only other thing I want to show is how you can download this data if you're interested in doing like additional GIS analyses or sort of digging deeper into this data. If you click on this bottom additional link here that says GIS data in this dashboard, it's probably really small on your screen, but it's the lowest left link. And that will take you to this page, which, as Suzanne showed, is like sort of the source data for this GIS information. And if you copy and paste this top URL into your ArcGIS or QGIS platform, you can directly connect to this data, and you can pretty much do anything that you would with it with like any GIS data that you create yourself. If you want to do a more specific query based on whatever attributes you're interested in, that's possible as well. So I think that's all I wanted to show. If anybody has any questions about how to use the tool or anything else, I'm definitely available to answer those questions.
Great, thank you, Emily. Yeah, not sure if there's any questions now. Again, folks can come off mute if you do have any questions. I did want to mention that I am putting the links to these different tools in the chat. So if you can access the chat for this meeting, I provided a link for both of the tools that were just discussed. And they were also in the invitation to the meeting as well. So those should be available. All right, still not seeing any questions. So we can just move right along. Yeah, thank you, Emily. And Kristen, I can turn it over to you.
Hi, everyone. Happy Monday. I'm just going to provide a bit more context around these tools, point out a few more, and just do a bit of a show and tell on how to navigate our website. Bear with me, share my screen. So the map that Emily just walked us through, the risk results per category and combined are all really part of our broader California Drinking Water Needs Assessment, which is an annual analysis that's conducted for the SAFER program under SB 200 to really help guide our activities under the SAFER program, both kind of where our staff do outreach, which is why we've got that great tool that Suzanne demonstrated, and then the one that Emily just demonstrated. And it's also supposed to help guide where we're targeting our technical assistance, which is why I think we're on the call with you all today. The methodology that was used to develop the dashboard, in particular that Emily showcased today, which is on the right-hand side of our page here, was developed through a pretty robust stakeholder engagement process. So if you go down to the bottom of our webpage here, you can see methodology development, and we have the risk assessment for domestic wells and state smalls. You can access all of the public webinar workshops and white papers and webinar recordings that we've been hosting all the way back, I guess, in 2019 to kind of get us to where we are today. And like Megan mentioned, it's one of those things that we continuously try to refine and improve as data becomes more available. And that socioeconomic risk layer is something that is new to the dashboard and to how we identify at-risk communities served by domestic wells and state smalls. If you go to the report that we just published earlier this year, you can get to it here, final report. It's pretty lengthy, but the reason why it's lengthy is it has a pretty extensive appendix, which details all of the methods and underlying data and assumptions in each of our different components of the needs assessment. So this one's just for public water systems, or this one actually, here we go. This one is, which one is this one? Yeah. So if you go back here in the appendix, you'll see all of the underlying data thresholds that got us to where we are. If you're interested in digging into more around what is socioeconomic risk, how is it calculated, the data sources, that is all documented in here if you wanted to dig into that underlying data and methodology. So just really wanted to point that out. And we also have at the very bottom, but we do have a portion of it sectioned out on our webpage. We do have a user guide too, demonstrating all of the stuff that Emily just covered. So if you're looking to share this with staff or with other folks who might be utilizing the dashboard, we do have a bit of a user guide on how to navigate it. But just to step back and reiterate, the purpose of the needs assessment, again, is to help really guide where we target, some of our outreach, our technical assistance dollars, our funding, in a way to be equitable in how we are prioritizing communities and water systems that we're engaging with. And I'm trying to find, it's a big report. We have a bit of a update here, kind of explaining stuff. We also have the SAFER dashboard, which, oops, I already have it opened here. The SAFER dashboard, hopefully you all are familiar with. It's been out for more than a year now. We released it last year. This is where you go to identify the currently failing and at-risk water systems across the state. It is updated daily. for failing, and then the at-risk status. We rerun the at-risk analysis quarterly now and update it in the dashboard to reflect kind of current updated data. And if you click on any of the water systems in the map, it's going to take you to their profile page, which you can use the search box to either type in a PWS ID number or a water system name or a county to pinpoint or locate a community water system that you're looking for. And hopefully it'll load. Sometimes Tableau can be a little laggy. But when you click on the link, it does open what we call the water system profile page, which does have in it information around why that water system is either at risk or failing. It has some demographic data and a little bit of high-level information about whether or not this system is DAC, if they have high levels of poverty or housing burden costs. And then you can also see if they've received any technical assistance or financial assistance from the Water Board since 2017. So this is an example of a system that is currently failing that has received some assistance. It looks like we don't have enough information to determine if they're DAC or not. But if you go down here, if you go to failing criteria, you'll see that the system is failing for repeated monitoring and reporting violations, and they've been on the list actually fairly soon, June of this year. So anyway, these are just kind of examples of how you can use the data. And for public water systems, if you're looking to get all of the data that's in this dashboard because you'd like to combine it with maybe some of the other data that we've shared with you today, if you click on this data link here, it's going to take you to the open data portal where this data is available and also refreshed at the same rate that I mentioned for the dashboard. So if you have any questions about this, let us know. We're really excited. We just launched this this year so that the data is more accessible and user-friendly. So you can access it through this file and plug it into any other dashboards or things that you're using an API. We did also release a new dashboard this year called the Water System Financial Capacity and Community Affordability Dashboard. Again, this is for all community water systems, similar to the SAFER dashboard. And it's really exploring how water systems across the state are performing for our financial capacity indicators and our community affordability indicators. So you can apply a bunch of different filters to try to tease out what's happening with financial capacity or community level affordability for individual systems or in comparison to others within certain filtered categories. So hopefully that provides enough background. And again, we're here to discuss if you have any questions around how we utilize these tools or the data behind them and what they mean to us. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Kristen. I guess while folks are thinking of questions, I have one question or kind of a question about more questions. So if folks are looking into these tools and they want to reach out, is there a person that they should contact or a mailbox that they should reach out to?
Yeah, for the tools that we have listed on the needs assessment webpage, there's a link to our DDW NAU, which is the needs analysis unit email, which is down here. And you can email us or me directly anytime if you have any suggestions for the dashboards, any enhancements or improvements. And I'm sure Suzanne also has an email address. We have the SAFER one you can always contact, or you can contact Suzanne directly. I will say in particular to the needs assessment related dashboards, you know, we're constantly hosting workshops and events trying to solicit feedback on everything related to the needs assessment. So if you're not already on the SAFER email list, you should definitely be subscribed so you can see when we're going to be hosting these workshops, because those are a really great opportunity to share your voice and your opinions and engage in a conversation with other stakeholders on how to improve our methods and our dashboards in order for them to be useful. So does that answer your question, James?
Perfect, thank you. And then I saw that Suzanne, you dropped some additional notes on the outreach tool in the chat just now.
Yeah, just it looks so long here in the little chat sidebar, but just a couple additional notes on the data that's in there, caveats, and of course, I'm happy to add additional data layers. If you guys come across something and you're like, this would be nice to have a permanent home in the map, we can look into adding that if we have the ability to. And then I'm just putting my email address in there too.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, John.
Hi. Yeah, I guess a couple quick questions about, or maybe not so quick, but about coordination with this. So I think at Community Water Center, we've been thinking a lot about, well, how do we, first of all, it's amazing to have all this data available and how much that really helps. And I think we've been thinking about, well, how do we transfer this data into TA projects? And, we've been, Mikkel, who's my colleague who's on the call as well, has been looking at, how do we look at where DAC and water quality risk and the presence of private wells intersect. And we've been trying to do that with some GIS mapping in Monterey County and Tulare County where we work, and have been talking with DFA as well about, well, if we're doing this, how are we coordinating with other TA providers? And just wondering, I guess, to what extent like the DDW Safer Engagement Unit is using these tools to do some of that coordination, or DFA, or I guess just what thoughts are about how to use this data statewide to kind of coordinate TA work.
Do you want me to respond to that one, James? So I mean, I guess just to give like a little context on where we're at, we have, obviously a number of technical assistance assignments that are already working with domestic well communities that, some of which were identified long before any of this mapping even existed and whatever. So we are currently trying to develop sort of a summary list of like where across the state all of the existing assignments are and who's working on them, and sort of that's like square one for us right now, is just a more comprehensive summary of that we can share out so that everybody's aware of where that's happening already. And then, the next step is figuring out, okay, well, moving forward, as we assign additional domestic well communities, how do we want to be more, proactive in using these tools and making sure we're identifying the right areas to focus our efforts. The engagement staff has been involved in some initial work on that. I know you're already aware of this, but just for other folks on the call too, we're developing this new concept of what's called a funding partner. And that's going to be with Stantec, and Stantec would have a role in sort of funding community level partners who are going to be doing on the ground outreach in communities, particularly with a focus on domestic well communities. And so we're going through a process right now to try to figure out, sort of as like a pilot, the first handful of communities that would be used to start doing that kind of work. And, I think part of the goal too is to sort of develop some more standardized outreach materials and things like that to help ensure that there's some consistency in the way this is being addressed in different areas. And so, we're figuring out exactly what that looks like, but it seems to me, and this is kind of where OPP comes in, our Office of Public Participation, because they're going to have a key role in helping implement this funding partner role, is to have some kind of forum for those of you who are already doing that type of work to have some input on whatever kind of statewide tools get developed. And then also, of course, I know like CWC, for example, is just interested in taking on more domestic well assignments and sort of making sure that everything fits together well, as far as like where nobody's duplicating efforts, but we're still hitting all the highest priority areas and that sort of thing. So, OPP is definitely going to be very involved in that. And also the Safer Engagement Group has been involved in helping identify, where we want to target moving forward. And it's sort of like at the very early stages of getting all of that funding partner work kicked off.
Oh, thanks a lot. That makes sense. I had one, I think when you were talking about where the existing work is happening, I think that's really important. And it made me think of something, a discussion we had with self-help. We're working on a domestic well consolidation project in West Goshen. And in a meeting with their emergency services group, we realized that they actually didn't really know that we were engaged there and like really moving forward with consolidation pretty quickly. And so that, that would have directed some of their emergency services work a little differently if they would have known, that POU doesn't make sense here because consolidation is going to happen within like a year. So once all that data is together, I think it'd be really interesting if somehow boundaries could be put on this map so that we could go in, and you probably already thought of this, but
yeah, I
that'd
mean,
be really
it
useful.
would be a dream if we had like certain boundaries and we could say to self-help's emergency services folks, like, don't drill a new well here because this is a target area for a future consolidation. I don't think we're quite there yet, but I think that's definitely something we'd like to strive towards in the future. Yeah.
Great. Thanks, John. Thanks, Megan. If there were any other questions or thoughts folks had. Okay, not seeing any come up. Well, I think if there are additional questions, you can always feel free to reach out to either me or others on this call. Definitely thank you for your time this afternoon. Thank you, Suzanne, Emily, and Kristen for participating and presenting. Really appreciate that.
Yeah. Thanks
right.
everybody for your time.
Great. Have a nice afternoon, everyone.
Thanks so much for setting this up.
Thanks.
Good job, guys. Thank you.